What we can see here are just some of the elements that are going to be going into the wing of the flying wing that we're building. And that first step basically is telling us to install this piece here, which is the control horn, and this carbon reinforcement, which they have called a carbon fiber spar, here into the wing in that spot there. Now that isn't necessarily very clear and obvious from those instructions, and something that's even equally not shown in those instructions is the fact, and I hope this is going to be visible, that in this control horn here there is a hole, and that hole is intended for the carbon fiber spar to go through like this, which then is in the wing, which is all very good, with the exception that the carbon fiber spar goes on this side of the wing, but this horn here should actually be on the other side. And so what we need to do is we need to first, let me just separate these here. We need to first make sure that we take this carbon fiber horn, pardon me, make sure we install it the correct direction, which will be towards the leading edge of the wing, and then flip over and guide the carbon fiber rod all the way through this groove, and make sure that it goes through the hole that was in that carbon fiber control horn. And that is actually a very, very tight fit, so it's going to take a little bit of jiggling around to make sure that this actually gets through far enough that we're able to pardon me, slide this through without having to dig through and dig up, which we really don't want to do. Now, as I first started to do this, the other thing too we want to make sure is that when we install it, we want the control horn here to be pointed in the right direction. If you were to somehow manage to do it and have it installed this way, you will end up having some issues. People who are smarter than me could probably say you might be able to make it work, but you're basically going to have to end up taking it all apart and rebuilding it. And since we will be putting glue in here, we want to get it right the very first time. Okay, so that's the first part that we're going to be doing. And as we continue on, this control horn here is part of the control mechanism, which will allow us to flex the elevon in order to be able to control and turn. And that will go along with a servo, which will also be mounted here in the bottom of the wing as we continue going forward, and together they will be what makes the the control of the aircraft possible. So for now, what I'll do is I'm just going to move these pieces up just a little bit out of the way. We'll take a look here and see exactly what this is going to take. Might not be all that easy. I don't want to do anything too damaging, but what I can see already is that the basic cutout is not completely cut out from the factory, so it's going to take a little bit of extra. I'm just going to use the other end of the horn. I don't want to use anything really huge or super sharp that might cause a lot of extra damage, and I'm just going to sort of clean out a little bit of foam and stuff that was left in there, not quite cleaned out properly when it was cut or molded. Go from both ways, and that should, I hope, allow it to go through better now. All right, so we'll see like that. Yeah, and now we can see that that control horn has come through much more completely. Now what I will do is from this side, begin feeding that spar through. There we are, felt it go through. And just continue sliding it all the way until it reaches the end and the end of the other side, and you might need to just force, just not hard, just a little bit to get it to snug down flush. And if we flip it over, we can now see that the control horn is on the elevon. It's pretty stable. It's got a little bit of wobble this way. I haven't done anything in terms of glue yet, so that looks quite good. I'm just going to, that's not snicking down here as far as I'd like on this side. Maybe something in there. Let's just do a quick, yeah, there's a little bit of extra foam right there that's preventing it. So all I'm doing is I'm just sort of, the foam in there was at a slight angle, so it wasn't being able to drop down, and I'm just pushing the bottom part of it back out so that the foam is more vertical. I will just reinsert. There we are. And that sits in much more flush now. Good. Now, the instructions did say to glue it, and there are lots of different choices you can use. Let me just see here. I put, or did my son steal it? My son stole it. My hot glue gun. No, he didn't. Here it is. So, if you have one, whoa, that's not hot. That's just extras. If you do have one, you could use hot glue on here without any question at all. You can use CA glue or crazy glue, or that sort of instant bond glue as well. I'm not sure you'd necessarily want to use shoe goo, but there's another one I think that's called Goop. That's the same basic company. That's the same kind of product. Any of these will work, or your favorite glue of your choice. Just make sure that whatever glue that you use to put this in here, to hold it in there, make sure that it's foam safe. You don't want to use any kind of glue that will actually eat at the foam. But other than that, you know, kind of make your choice. Now, what I'm going to do is, I've got this here, which is a UV glue. I use it for, I tie flies for fly fishing, and I use this a lot with that. And what's nice about it is it will fill a little gap, run into place, and not set until you put UV light on it. So I just put a tiny little drop in here as I'm going along, and I'll put that snugged down. It's still absolutely not setting whatsoever. I'm going to just put a drop, very thin bead on the top, like this, and I'm going to spread that out here in just a second. I'm just going to take my finger and very gently lay that out so it's extremely thin. Now, when I come with my, still not super happy with this edge over here. So what I'll do is I come in with the UV light, and just where it's shining is going to start to set. None of the other part is set yet. So that will now hold in there, and I can just come over and set all of the rest of it with the UV light. What's nice about this, there are several things, is this will just continue to cure the more it's exposed to UV. So every time you take it outside, it just encourages it to set more. It's flexible, it's waterproof, and it works really, really, really well. Now, by no means do you need to use this at all. I just happen to have this because I have it for another hobby, but putting a dab of hot glue running it down with your fingers so you're getting a very, very smooth. You don't want to have big bumps and excess glue laying all over the place. So you want that to be as smooth as possible. And so that's basically all you need to do in order to install that carbon spar. Now I'm going to just put a dab more on this side to finish it off, and we'll be good. If it will go with me here. There we are. Another really nice thing about this glue is that even though it sets and grabs really, really well, it doesn't flake off or break off, but it peels off if you want it to. And so it doesn't tend to burrow in deep into the foam underneath it, and it'll just kind of grab very well on the surface, and if you need to take it off, you can actually just kind of pull it off and it comes. Hot glue will do that as well. Just use it sparingly. There we are. And so that's the basic idea of adding that spar and the control horn, and it adds a lot of rigidity. This is quite, I don't know, I was going to say wobbly, but it's fairly flexible, pliable foam, but that makes it quite a bit more rigid. All right, the next part of this was, pardon me, installing the actual servo, which will be the control that allows us to, or the motor that allows us to physically move the elevon over here. And this is another one of the reasons why I really like this model and wanted to choose it. Like I said before, it's very beginner friendly. And so if you've never used a servo before, well, when you look at the place where it's supposed to go, you really have only one choice. There is no other way this is going to fit in there. So makes it nice so we can just absolutely plop it in, and we're just dry fitting this for now. And there's a channel for the wire to flow through, and that's it. Now I mentioned earlier that one of the other sort of beginner features on this is the plug that allows us to take the connections that are out on the wing and join them into the fuselage automatically. Well, here's how it works. The plug is right here. You can see it's, I hope we can see here that it's, the wires are color coded, black, red, and white for the ground, power, and signal. They exactly match the wires that are on the servo here. All we need to do is just make sure that they match on here and connect them. Pardon me, as that's a little snug fit, which is good. And that's not going in quite right. Something's, there we are. There we are. And if you can see here, there are two of the plugs. Each of the plugs, you'll see one's on top basically and one's on the bottom. That corresponds to the set of pins on the side here that match bottom and top. And the other channel here is for, oops, this far exposed, or far hidden compartment here that I'm going to try to expose now. But this foam is very stiff and sticky in there. There we are. This is another component that compartment, sorry, that can be used for another piece of gear. It could be where you put your receiver. A GPS unit could go out here. A variety of different things. And that's what this channel here is for, is so that if you were to put another piece of electronics or something there, you would have a place to run the wires for it. I'll just seal that back up because I won't be using it. And then just make sure the wire fits through that channel, and we'll tuck this back in here so that it's a little bit more secure. Oh, that's coming out. Now in this case, I wouldn't go crazy with it, but obviously these wires are wanting to kind of pop out a little bit. For now, I'm just going to put a very small dab of this glue. I wouldn't do this with other kinds of glue. I'm just doing this temporarily. Otherwise, use a piece of tape for what I'm doing right here. I just happen to know that this will come off very easily. Just use tape otherwise. And that's just so that this doesn't keep popping out as we work on it. All right, and I will do the same. I'm going to use my own advice. And just while I'm working on it here, just so that this doesn't keep flip-flopping around, I'm just going to put a piece of tape on it. That will come off later. That's just stuff stays in place. And basically, that is the basic idea of putting together the wing and putting in the servo. It's a friction fit. I don't think it really needs to have anything else. That's not going to be going anywhere. On the other side, we can see here now where the servo comes out, and what we will do is attach a horn to it, and I'll show you. This is going to get very difficult to see, so I will show you on a separate one here in a second. In fact, I'll just do that right now. Basically, it comes up and ends up being a system like this. And so basically right now, if we lay it this way, that's how it is in the wing. The servo is under the wing. It's going to have an arm like this, come up through the wing. It will have the rod that gets attached across to the servo horn over here. And when the motor is activated, I gotta hold this very tightly here, it tilts that servo horn. And by doing that, the elevator will go up and down for us. And so what we need to do in here is just very quickly, I'm going to come back, pull this out. That's why it's just a friction fit. Just very easily, I want it to be 90 degrees to this, so it's coming straight out the top of the wing. So I'll put it 90 degrees to the servo. It fell right through. 90 degrees to the servo. If it'll let me. Like so. And I'm not going to buckle this right tight right now, but it does have a screw to hold that. Sorry. Magnets. It just goes right in the top. That will secure that servo horn to the servo. It's at 90 degrees to the servo. We'll just pop it back in. Okay. And now we can see that from here we have that servo arm that sticks up. We will be able to attach, like we see on here, the bar to and from. And I'm just very loose fitting this right now. This is not the finished job. These simply thread together. Do it carefully so you don't cross thread and strip things out. This is plastic. Anytime you're working plastic and metal together, the metal can destroy it. If you're not careful, so just be careful with it. Now this is just very, very loose. Okay, this is going to need further adjustment as we finish things off later. But essentially, you end up with something that does not want to cooperate. There we are. Something that looks very, very approximately, this is not set up right. I'm just going to stretch it out. There's too much gap in there right now, but that's the basic idea. Now, rather than go through all of this tightening up, what I'll do is I'll show you how that's done in a little bit. But the reality is, this is what you'll do for one wing. For the other wing, you simply do exactly the same thing in reverse or repetition. So let's just take this a little bit more closely here and pull it apart. So I'm just going to tighten these up a little bit until we get to approximately the right gap here. I could probably do this with a set of calipers and measure exactly and all of that, but that would be smart. So we can still see we got a ways to go. Oops. And how are we now for distance? That's getting pretty close. So what we're doing here is a rough, very rough fitting on this to get to see, you know, approximately where it is. This will require quite a bit of fine-tuning, but this will give you a basic idea of the basic initial goal. Now, I'm going to have to double check about the sides of these servo connectors. They might have to be swapped out. There we are, that's better. Okay, there we are. So that is the basic idea of what you're looking for. Okay, so like I said, this is the initial setup where we have it like this. It will require tuning to make sure that the distance here is right from the beginning, because that will determine the initial angle of the elevon here. And in order for it to fly properly, we need to make sure that that's set at an appropriate level. But for now, that's essentially what we're looking for. Now, it's up to you to go and do the other one. When you're done, we'll take a look at the next part.